We have a new visitor today. This is Dylan. I'm not even sure to call you a classmate because we weren't really classmates, but I would say associate.
I would go with associate. We've drank many a beer together in various situations, which I think puts us closer than most people would consider.
There's another word for it, not classmate or friend. Something along the comrade area. It wasn't comrade. It's another word. I'm blanking on it for whatever reason. I don't know. But so Dylan, you are a graduate along with me of the WVU Sport Management Program. Reason we know each other is because we have similar friends, and our years overlap. So I got to meet you through them. So what's going on?
Just sitting around with the quarantine, following every bit of breaking news I can get my hands on. We're both operations guys by trade, so finding new people to give us money to host events that aren't happening.
So what all do you do right now? Last I heard, I think you were in Colorado. Is that right?
I took a vacation to Colorado.
Oh, I thought I saw you had a job in Colorado.
No, I've been trying to find one, but
yeah. Job market sucks right now.
Colorado, but I was in Cincinnati for most of 2019. And
maybe that's what I was thinking of.
To Colorado, 3 times last year. So
I don't know. Maybe did you get a job in Cincinnati? I thought I could have sworn I saw you post. Okay, did you? Okay, I'm confusing it.
Yeah, it was a travel gig. So I was in 26 states in Canada. So I was in Cincinnati, but I wasn't.
Okay. So this is something that you obviously must feel very personal about because you reached out to me. I didn't reach out to you on this. You even tagged me in something on Facebook, and I immediately thought you might have been hacked. I'm like, Dylan never tags me and stuff in Facebook. And you're like, hey, can I come on the podcast and talk about this whole college football, Big Ten, Pac-12 conference, not wanting to play, whatever.
Yeah, it was just you read the quotes that they put out, and I even last night got into Joel Klatt at Fox Sports posted a link to an internal Pac-12 document that they released externally after the decision, and it was 12 pages on why they decided that they weren't going to play, what the supposed reasoning was for the cancellation. I got 7 pages in and took a break because it was just they weren't saying it. They were trying to make it. It was legalese and hoping that no one was going to read past the first 3 or 4 pages. Because it was like, oh, we're going to wear masks and we're going to do all this stuff. They're basically listing out all of the stuff that they've been doing up to this point that's been working. And you get to page 10 and 11 and 12, which is obviously concluding the document, and it tramples over everything that was said in the first 9 pages. Because it said literally, I wrote this down last night reading it, it states outright that the only cases that have come from anywhere on the campus community that have gotten anywhere near an athletics team, football or otherwise, is non-athletics activities.
Yeah.
So why do when we have, the NBA bubbles working perfectly, NHL bubbles working perfectly, you basically quarantine, even in a regular academic year, I would say, you're pretty much quarantining, outside of the occasional class, which everybody's going to online classes, the football team quarantines themselves socially anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally you get, situations like Louisville men's soccer where they, kicked 3 guys off the team for an off-campus party, which was 3 dudes drinking in their own place, and then 70 of their friends that they don't even know half the people that are there invite themselves over. That's the situation that all these lawyers are afraid of. But there's been one of those, and how many athletic departments, and it's just, and then
just in Division One, or FBS, it's 130. I think the number is now. I don't even know how many are in FCS.
I think it's up to 131 or 132 because
it's easily I think over 300 if you include all of Division One.
Right, yeah. And so it's they're trying to execute on the margins instead of trying to just take care of everybody that's doing anything, and they even list. And I'll even pull up the document here on the other half of my screen. They list the 8 things that are supposed to be what they're making their decisions based off of. I read all 8. There's maybe one that they're not hitting on right now, which, I mean, that's probably what they're looking at is that one. But inability to isolate new cases and quarantine. Every college, I'm sure, we're in the same circles as far as WVU announcements go. They've retrofitted an entire dormitory just for quarantining. Mm-hmm. And athletics has, Kansas, they have their own dorm for the basketball players. Like, just take that one, you're fine. There's your quarantine. So, like, that's not an issue. Lack of testing or the frequency of testing, that hasn't been a problem since late May, early June for the whole country, let alone athletic departments that have money set aside for this to be able to keep their football money flowing. Contract tracing, we know where the players are 24 hours a day. They're wearing a heart rate monitor for 16 of it.
Yeah.
The hospitals being afraid of being overwhelmed. Outside in the Pac-12 footprint, outside of maybe LA, no one else is talking about that. That's not been a concern of late either. Cardiac evaluations, they do those on a weekly basis or sometimes a daily basis in football. Medical staff ability to care for student athletes because of workload, that's never been an issue for any athletic department. Now, there's been some talk about taking student ATs out of kind of their practicum hours. That may present a slight issue with that, but I mean, those guys are going to be actual ATs in 18 months or less in some cases after their practicum.
AT, you mean athletic trainer, I assume?
Yeah.
So I've done a poor job of explaining all this so far. This is Dylan Sine, a fellow graduate of the WVU Sport Management Program, and you are talking about the Big 12 or the Big Ten and the Pac-12's decisions to cancel their seasons because of coronavirus concerns, and you've basically gone through everything. You went right into it, which I love, and came out with all sorts of points, whatever, and I was totally unexpecting it. I thought we were going to do some small talk, then get into it. So that's kind of on me, though. But I love it so far, and I think you've hit the nail on the head on a lot of points.
Yeah, that's we kind of off air, did a little bit of a small talk, and I was, was going to drop the jersey on. It's
right. And I love it, Carl Joseph. I love it. Hold on, I assume that's Carl Joseph. I don't know of any other number 8 players with that uniform. Yeah.
If you ask the NCAA, it's not.
Hang on. On the back, does it not give a name?
No, it's straight blank.
So I got mine from China. Hang on, I'll get it. Where is this thing? Same one with the Joseph backwards, obviously, but I have a Will Greer one too, also from China. But anyway.
Yeah, this is bookstore issued. I paid $0 for it through a giveaway. So.
Oh, really?
Free jerseys are never a bad thing.
Oh, that's a sweet deal then. So. All right, so what was was it yesterday or Monday the Big Ten made its decision and the Pac-12 followed literally within about an hour? Was that yesterday? I think it was yesterday.
Tuesday. That was yesterday. Monday was the day that Sunday evening was the emergency meeting / vote that didn't take place.
Right.
And then Monday was kind of press conference day, everybody getting their ducks in a row, letting the lawyers write out the press release for Tuesday's announcement.
Right. I thought that was hilarious because, that whole thing broke Sunday evening. Monday, I'm expecting some sort of word. I'm, waiting on my phone all day for it. Never really happens. Big Ten comes out and says, "Oh, we didn't have a vote. We don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah.
And I don't know did you ever meet Jerem McLeaver? He was in my class at the SM program.
I believe we met at the summit at one point.
So he's a Purdue guy. I debated having him on the podcast, but he's busy with wife and kids. And he sends me this article about how the Big Ten refutes it. I'm like, dude, that's damage control. They're not going to admit it right off the bat.
Because they're not ready. That's what that was.
So then Tuesday they make the decision. I think the Pac-12 sometime on Monday said, "Oh, we're going to go through this with a fine-tooth comb, whatever." I'm paraphrasing here. But basically, we're going to make our own decision. Within an hour, like 2 at the most, Pac-12 makes a decision.
It was 45 minutes.
Oh, I think it was within an hour. Definitely within 2. I'm like, yeah, you made a decision. You just followed the Big Ten.
Yeah. Well, and because it wasn't like they haven't been been talking. They're like, oh, we're making all these decisions independent of one another.
Well, I'm pretty sure.
All five
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm pretty sure
meeting.
I'm pretty sure the same thing happened with the conference-only schedule. Big Ten comes out of left field with it. Hey, we're going to play just a conference schedule. Then the Pac-12, I think, the same day, maybe not within 2 hours, but within the end of the day, said, "Oh yeah, we're going to do that too." So they're just following in their footsteps.
Yeah, so I don't think people realize how much the commissioners actually talk. I think most people didn't expect like that. That was the backroom discussion with the conference-only schedule. But then the Big Ten was like, "Oh yeah, I thought we were all in agreement," and they hit the red button, and everybody's like, "Oh wait, what? We thought we were waiting until next week for that." And so that's like, and even I think it was Saturday. I could be wrong on that, but there was all five commissioners on kind of the emergency meeting, like, oh crap, what do we do? Like, acting like the situation's changed. And I was watching it was an appearance by Reese Davis on afternoon ESPN yesterday, where he said, his kind of whole bit was, what changed? 2 weeks ago, we're setting a schedule.
Yep.
Hell, in the Big 12, we talked about a little bit off air before we got started, that the Big 12's like, here's our schedule. They dropped that at 10:15 this morning, Eastern time, ready to roll, start the day. Here's our schedule. Just added basically 2 more bye weeks in there.
So as excited as I was to get that news last night that the Big 12, hence why I'm wearing my WVU stuff, that the Big 12 is going to be playing, look like they're going to be playing this year, I'm still a little cautious because the Big Ten just swiped it out from under their fans' feet. They're like Lucy with the football, and the fans are Charlie Brown. I'm worried the Big 12 is going to do the same thing eventually.
I mean, I can see that, but here's what, because you look even the ACC and the SEC with kind of bring them in to fill out the 5 that we haven't mentioned.
Yeah.
The ACC, as much as I have been since 2010 for any WVU fans on here, I've had a disdain for Duke since early April 2010 for obvious painful.
I was there. I hate it. I hate Duke with a passion. For those that don't understand what we're talking about the 2010 Final Four.
I was baby steps away from free tickets to that through a tailgate contact of my father's and I. And Dad forgot to check his voicemail for a whole week. And the week that he said, "Hey, I got a penthouse in Indianapolis. Are y'all getting in the car with me?" And Dad checks his phone 2 days after the Final Four. But to get back on Duke, it's like, if there's any place in America, and I've got some family that have gone to hospitals in the Duke system, if there's anybody whose medical opinion I trust outside of like the USC, UCLA, and the Mayo Clinic, it's Duke. They know what they're talking about. And when the ACC's head of medical decisions.
Okay, so I'm just about to ask, what did Duke say? Because I am very curious about this.
Yeah, Duke is basically kind of runs the ACC as far as medical decisions. It's Duke's guy. It's like their head medical person on campus.
Chief of medicine, whatever.
Chief of medicine, whatever his official title is. But his quote was something to the effect of, "We still feel like with the medical data that we have, particularly in the ACC footprint and for the most part nationally, that we can have a successful football season. Yes, and he admitted it in the quote, there are going to be the occasional, 1 or 2 cases on every team. Maybe you get, a position group or something that has it and, may, take down a little bit of that depth. But he goes, the measures that are in place that have been decided on and, met on for the most part of the last 6 months, although if you read some of the quotes, the first time that, a spring football season was discussed in Big Ten circles was 4 days ago. What were we doing for 6 months? Since March, we've had 5.5 months, almost 6. What were we twiddling our thumbs for? You had nothing to do this summer. You canceled all the sports. You had no College World Series taking you up your summer. You didn't have vacations to go on if you're the big guys at the top that are going to the Bahamas and Europe every year.
Yep.
You didn't have that. You had nothing to do but sit in your home office, which all these guys have, and just figure out what are you going to do to save $1 billion enterprise.
And what's so odd about this is maybe not last night, but it might have been at the press conference today, Bob Bowlesby, the commissioner of the Big 12, comes out with a plan. if you told me, it sounded like a plan at least, maybe not an official plan, but it sounded like he had something, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is our plan for dealing with COVID while also playing football. And I was like, if you had told me in March the Big 12 would have its act together and actually have a plan, I would have laughed before the rest of the really, not, I shouldn't say before all the conferences, but if you would have told me they would have a plan, I would have laughed. No way they would have a plan. And yet here they are. Hey, we're going to do it this way, this, and this. And I'm still stunned.
Well, if you go back to my reaching out to you, the first thing that I reached out to you about was the day 2 weeks ago when the Big 12 ostensibly kind of said out loud, we really don't have a plan. They were the last ones making decisions. It was, the Big Ten, Pac-12 making a decision, the ACC and the SEC are like, okay, 2 days later, that sounds like a good idea. And then the Big 12 just kind of, it's the run at the end of the line, just following along. And I was like, what the hell is Bowlesby doing? That was, I believe, if not part of my quote, the insinuation of my quote to you to reach out was like, what the hell is Bowlesby doing? Because I've various times over the years of the Big 12, I've grown up in the old Big East, and there was nothing really big time about the old Big East for a long time as far as controversies were concerned, because they had all their stuff in order. And I was like, I've had issues with Bowlesby every once in a while over the years, some more high profile than others, and it was like, all right, here's the last straw. It was like Bowlesby's got to be on that hot seat. He just has to be gone. And I think you said, we come out in the last 36 hours, and Bowlesby looks like a genius.
Yeah.
He just pulls the rabbit out of the
I
hat,
was stunned, dude. I was reading all this stuff. People are tweeting it, and I'm like, oh my God, Bowlesby's actually making good decisions. It's just hilarious.
You couldn't have scripted. I mean, it's a Hollywood story. Like, Bowlesby's just pulling it.
I really don't get the decision behind the Big Ten. I mean, or in the Pac-12, because you talked about it a little bit. You read what exactly did you read? You said you read about 10 to 12 pages of it.
Yeah, so I will scroll back up to the top here. The official title of the document is Health and Wellbeing Considerations for Pac-12 Institutions, Guidance for Local Planning for Return to Sporting Activity, updated August the 10th.
All right, so that was what? Sunday? No, Monday.
That was Monday. But basically the decision was made and they just didn't put the new date on the document.
Right.
And it is a combination of their...
And you read it, and you think that it is an entirely legal speech?
It's dumbed down legal speech,
right.
if you hold my page, but some of the subtitles is just current assessment of situation where they're like, oh, we're concerned about the virus. Cool, welcome to the other 7 billion of us that are concerned about the virus. And details of return to campus, which is already happening, and that's
I want to make a note to get on to that point. I'll let you keep talking, but yeah, I'm going to talk about that.
But because that was something I was going to get into, and then it just details, contact tracing and how one gets the coronavirus. It was basically, if you literally took the dude, they didn't have any connection to the International Space Station, and we sent those 2 dudes up on the SpaceX rocket, and they didn't hear about anything about college football for 2 months, or even were up there for a year and a half and didn't know anything about the coronavirus, and then just plopped down. I don't know. It's like, hey, there's a pandemic going on. This was literally a 12-page pamphlet of, here you go. Here's explaining coronavirus from day one, and it explains contact tracing. This document could have been 3 pages, and it just details, face coverings is 3 paragraphs. Social distancing in locker rooms is another half a page. How to work out in the weight room, and it even says in the weight rooms and conditioning activities subtext. Over the past 2 months, the Pac-12 has successfully demonstrated, keynote there, that scheduled strength and conditioning in small groups 10 to 12 with face covering and social distancing can be completed without increased risk of infection rates. So you're saying...
You said you've done the job well.
It works. So then why is it when I go from that on page 4 that I get to page 12 and you give me this big red box that just looks like something they literally just copy and pasted? I think they sent 3 interns onto the CDC website, said, give me everything on the coronavirus, and then we're going to toss in a couple of paragraphs about football. It's literally how this reads.
What can you show? Is it a physical thing? Can you show what you're looking at?
I can. Yeah, so let me see if I can screen share it with you because it's just a document that I have here on.
If it's digitally, don't worry about it. People can look it up for themselves. But I was just curious what that final page looked like.
Oh, here, I got you. You click the start sharing button. It works. You got me?
Yes. So there it is. Okay, Dylan bringing in some technology, which this podcast desperately needs. So that's what we're looking at here.
So this is their straight out. I mean, we're literally copying it from Harvard right here. Harvard Global Institute, and it's a breakdown of what is considered spread of the virus.
Right.
This doesn't need to be in the Pac-12 document. I get why it's in there, and then you scroll down to testing recommendations, which all of these, by my estimation, everything that I've studied about this virus, and I'm by no means a medical professional or epidemiologist of any sort, but they talk about the point of care test, which is just essentially you get a result within the hour, which is what has been the primary manufacturing goal of the country recently is quicker testing, more accurate testing, and then you get into they explain how the test works. No one understands that except for the doctors, which I mean I guess you want to put that in there, then go right ahead, but.
This isn't anything. This is.
Yeah, like this was, when I clicked on it for Joe Clark, because I was like, oh, the Pac-12, listed like everything. This is why they did what they did. Oh, this is fantastic. And then I get into, we're talking about, hey, coaches are doing virtual recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, this is stuff. This is shit we already know.
Right. There's literally no reason for this. Saying that teammates, unless they live together, which most guys on a football team tend to live together based on the 20 years I've been around college football. Saying that they should get, roommates get their same rooms or single rooms on the road. Okay, fine. But, why is this? This just has no reason for anything. And then it was scrolled out here to the conclusion paragraph and just kind of leave that where it is. Like,
the Pac-12 has concerns that many of
the recommendations can't be achieved consistently. They already are. You've admitted that 3 times in this document.
Then what the hell are we talking about here? Like, what were the other 11 pages for? This could have been a simple press release.
You needed this page. You needed page 12.
I really don't get that. Everything, I know we're going through a second wave here, but everything about the second wave, in my opinion, has said it's not as bad this time around. Am I right?
I mean, I've seen some of the same things. I mean, we know how it's what this is the second wave is essentially coming back around for the folks our age, which it's on us to not spread it. And in some cases, you see the block parties and stuff in New Jersey with 700 people at them. I don't even know 700 people on this planet, but how those people make those connections is all on me. I mean, you and I've never been at a party together with more than 20 people at it, and
nope.
But you've got situations like that, and like, that's on us. And I've got some mutual friends of ours that every Friday, Saturday, Sunday is another Instagram post of theirs that I'm like, what are we doing? But like, it's coming back around for people our age at a lower mortality rate. I mean, it's infection rate's the same, and that's part of the problem. But
I just don't get it. I have so many thoughts. I don't even know where to go with it. So I don't really need this anymore. I think we've kind of.
Yeah, I will de-share you there.
Nah, that's fine. So let's get back to it. What do you think was the decision for the Big Ten and the Pac-12 to just cancel their seasons? Because I'll tell you right now, I'm not buying it at all that this was about concerns of player safety. They'll hide under that flag and they'll say, oh, well, we care about the players. Everything about this sounds, and I think it's pretty much been proven, it's lawyers not wanting to deal with a lawsuit, and the schools don't want to pay potential money for it.
Yeah, honestly 100%, and this kind of goes back to, I alluded to Reese Davis's appearance on ESPN. His quote outright was, "What has changed? Has the medical science changed? Then show it to us."
Exactly. Exactly.
Pac-12 thought they were showing it to us, and they
didn't show anything. They showed us stuff we already know.
Show anything. Right. We essentially recapped the months of March, April, and May is what you did in a document in August. So you've said nothing has changed other than the potential, which I wrote it down, and I'm not a heart surgeon of any type, but this potential of myocarditis, which happens at a higher rate amongst, or at least gets detected at a higher rate among athletes, and is, I do believe, the same condition that every August you hear a half dozen or so unfortunate incidents where 16, 17-year-old guys in 2-a-days are dying from an undiagnosed heart condition. That's like, okay, we get that, and that's, I believe, one of the Red Sox pitchers, whose name is just blanking on me.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I saw that
season, because that's what he had about, and it created an onset of myocarditis.
So that's the thing that pisses me off, is that happened, and they blamed it on COVID. The media did. They were like, "Oh, he's opting out, or Red Sox are opting him out because of complications with COVID." This doesn't sound like complications with COVID. It sounds like complications with whatever this other disease is. Whatever you said.
It's a genetic, based on my understanding of it, which I could be entirely wrong, and if I am, I'm sure the internet will come for me one day. But I've always understood it to be a genetic-based condition that's just hard to diagnose unless you're taking EKGs on a weekly basis, which most guys at 16 and 17 and even 19 or 20 are not.
Yeah.
And that's why it doesn't get noticed. But to get back to kind of the real reason why I think that this decision was made, and particularly with the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, is those are the two Power 5 conferences that have had, big motions of the hashtag We Are United movement, which a lot of
I'm glad you got into
points,
that.
Which I have that document that I've read through several times as well, right on the Players Tribune, that list down a lot of their racial issues that they see on campus, which are very much legitimate in most cases, and I have no problem addressing those. And I'm sure most athletic directors and coaches, if they aren't already attempting to address those, you look at some of the stuff that Neil Brown has done, participating in marches with his players, even, and trying to address everything. The coding situation entirely separate from that. But
that's bullshit. I'm going to tell you right now, but that's a different topic.
But that's, I think, it's just a separate set of circumstances, and facts are not facts. But I think that's just where you get into that situation of what I told it to you earlier, that essentially what the players have done is it's a backdoor attempt to create a college football players union, which at this point is essentially what we would call Twitter. That is the CFBPA. And it works for certain things and gets certain things done, and addresses concerns that in some cases need to be addressed. But the Pac-12, when they come out, and I'm of the belief in most cases that they say, "Oh, we represent thousands of players in the Pac-12. You got 12 teams, there's 100 guys. You don't represent thousands of players." But that's potentially just a faux pas of the English language that they added an S when there wasn't an S. But in most cases, I think you're looking at potentially, if not just like 5 or 10 guys on every team, you're maybe looking at probably 50 guys that know each other throughout the conference, that got together and list out what they think that they want. And I wrote this down, and because I literally, closed my computer screen, put my laptop lid for the first time I read the Pac-12 We Are United post, just because two points in there that are the most absurd, I think, possible. You and I, having gone through several sport finance courses over the years, know the stat that every sport management grad knows, that there are, out of the Power 5 and the FBS total.
He froze on me. Son of a bitch. Right when he was making a good point. me see if still says he's connected. There you are.
Here we go.
What happened there?
Good old basement
Okay.
Got the old recording studio down.
Well, it figures that happens right when you're making a good point. Like literally, like you were like, we've gone through this in class. What happens is, and then it just cut out. So go ahead and finish your point. Uh-oh. Son of a bitch.
There we go.
Hopefully that works that time.
Yeah. I just gotta get back to the 5G network. That's all it is. 5 gigahertz.
All right, now this time, finish your point.
Let's finish the point. So, I'm not sure where it caught me out there, but 22 to 25 teams on an annualized basis out of 130 FBS teams, not counting the FCS because that's just a different metric, that make money under the current system after the addition of full cost of enrollment, etc., counting all of their millions of dollars of donation money. And, most of those are Power 5 institutions. That's why they're, for the most part, the ones that are kind of clinging to football in an attempt to, kind of save the ship. But a 50-50 revenue sharing plan on an organization that's barely breaking even, that's like going to a bar that's making $100 a night and saying, I need a raise.
Dylan, the NFL, the National Football League won't even do 50-50. You think college football is going to do that? Absolutely not.
But you notice that it's also written, it's not a profit share, it's a revenue share. They want half off the top. And just
the NFL doesn't even do that.
And the NFL doesn't share profits, but they at least are sharing, monetary gains. There are no monetary gains to share in the collegiate model. Yes, there are things about the collegiate model that needs to change and ways to change them, but a college football CBA is not the way to change them.
No.
So, just to kind of not belabor the point, but the second part of that, the financial document section of the Pac-12's, opt-out demand sheet / CBA was they want to, quote, pull endowment money from the institution in order to save cuts like at Stanford. And it literally, in parentheses, writes out what Stanford's endowment is. So essentially what they're saying is, be damn the rest of the university. We don't need an English department. We don't need a women's and gender studies department. We don't need an AFAM department.
Which, by the way,
we need a rowing team.
By the way, we don't need a women's gender department.
That point as it may be. Still, I mean, pick any other department that has, for example, I don't know how much you politics. I have some Fairmont State connections as well. They had an academic department that had 7 enrolled students over 2 majors that was costing the university $700,000 a year. And there's a massive cultural movement to save that department. Why? That's essentially what these players are saying. If it's not financially feasible, and frankly at Stanford, do I believe that they don't have the money to pull together to save a men's volleyball program that is a decade removed from a national championship and 2 Final Fours. That, why you're getting rid of that program, I don't understand, because I think that there's some monies that can be moved around and some cost savings that, if it weren't for COVID, could have been implemented. But I don't understand why we think that the endowment is all of a sudden just this magical thing to pull. If endowment determined athletic success, we would still be in the 1930s with Harvard winning every other college football national championship and the Army. And we're not.
So, I think these decisions have come at a very opportune time. The first being what we talked about. They're just using COVID as a reason to not play or whatever. But the driving force behind that, I think, is somewhat these players getting a voice, which I'm not a big player first guy. I think, I'm not a big fan of like players associations. I think that they're all a bunch of whiny girls sometimes. But I'm smart enough, I'll say, to admit that's the direction we're going in with college football, and I don't really have an issue with that, especially with the whole name, image, likeness thing coming down. I don't know how you're going to enforce that without a players association. But so there's that, and the conferences and want to want to remain in control. There's also the fact that if they don't play football season, that loses a lot of money for the smaller schools, the Group of Fives and the FCS schools, who rely on playing these big dogs and Power Five schools. They get paid millions of dollars to play these sports. That's where a lot of their revenue comes from in athletic departments, to go to Alabama, get their ass kicked, go back home with a few $1 million in their pocket. That's how they make money. If they don't play, these smaller schools can't play because they can't field a team.
Absolutely.
I think that's it. They're squeezing them out.
I think the number for something, it was in the neighborhood of $50 to $60 million that the Big 12, Big 10 not playing non-conference games affected just the MAC.
Yeah, which is why the MAC canceled.
I may be superseding that for their entire non-conference schedule, and that's where you get into some of to circle it back into, the finances back into COVID-related decisions. If you look at something like the Eastern Kentucky situation, where they have 3 members and counting that have outright left the program, and their kicker, Landon White, I believe was his name, who outright in an Instagram post list out that the reason that he thinks that the coach and others are allegedly flouting coronavirus procedures and other requirements to get the team ready to play was they've got, I believe it's $500 or $750 a check waiting for them a month from today on Shane Lyons' desk. That was the reason that's controlling every decision in Richmond, Kentucky over the last 6 to 8 weeks.
For those listening, Shane Lyons is the athletic director at West Virginia. Sorry, I was telling these people. Shane Lyons is the athletic director here at West Virginia. Eastern Kentucky was supposed to play in Morgantown, or is still supposed to play in Morgantown, but yes, that is the driving force for why they are still trying to have a season, because they know they're going to get a big check from Shane Lyons. But that's absolutely a driving force. I think these big schools don't want to pay these little guys anymore to come play, and they're willing to squeeze them out. We know you can't make it. And I think this decision, I was worried all 5 power conferences were going to cancel. I thought for sure the Big 12 was going to cancel its fall sports. And I thought the ACC was going to follow, and then I thought the SEC begrudgingly was going to as well, because outside of the SEC, who wants to play just an SEC schedule and only have the SEC games on? I think that they would have been pressured to cancel as well. But now that you have 3 out of 5, I think we're likely going to have a season at this point, and not every school, there's not going to be a huge domino effect like I thought there would be, because once these small schools don't make revenue, like, that's it. They can't play, at least for a while. I thought the Power 5 schools could take a year or 2 off. Sure, it would affect their finances in the athletic department for a year or 2, but for the most part, they'd be fine. These smaller schools at the FBS level, at the FCS level, I think it could have set them back 5 years, maybe even a decade.
Yeah, and I would even argue that that's part of the not necessarily financially, but as far as setting teams back. I've heard that from just several either memes or just legitimate reporting, that's part of the fear of people that weren't in the know and the decision making of the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, is that you've got, if these other 3 play, and somehow with just the way that my understanding of epidemiology is, we come back and the flu season combined with depending on the vaccine schedule of potentially a coronavirus vaccine, you could be looking at a massive, a redo of this March, next March, January and February, when you're trying to get spring camp for a season for these bigger schools that they may not get to play in the spring. And then you're looking at All right, you've had 3 conferences play. Where are the recruits going?
So I'm going to tell you that right now. They're not playing football in the spring. They can say it all they want. I have heard several people say it ain't happening. There's no way they can do it. They're doing this to save face with players. Hey, don't leave just yet. We'll play in the spring, or we're trying to play in the spring. Once spring rolls around, they'll keep those players, keep those recruits there, and then they'll, bring it out from under their feet again. Well, we can't play, sorry.
Yeah, and that's what I think. I mean, I can 100% see that happening, just also from the fact of, you've got to save those finances, and if you start losing players, it's over, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do to bring it back. But to get it back on like kind of a health angle, Reese Davis made a comment in a Get Up appearance. Not to keep harping about it, Reese Davis, I think, is one of the more measured personalities that still remains on staff at ESPN. And his point was, if you're playing, and I think Lewis Riddick kind of made the same point as well, you start a season, and every timeline I've seen is we're starting in March. So you're combining, you're killing revenue on certain instances between your potential basketball season, if that depends on how that shakes out. So you've got your 2 biggest sports that are intentionally, for the most part, not scheduled at the same time, competing. But also you're looking at football players that if we start in March, between, say, March 8th, 15th, whenever you start the season, and December, you're talking 9 months. And if there's 2 national championships somehow squeezed in there, depending on the way that, a CFP schedule shakes out, you're looking at 28 to 30 wars. Because that's what football is a physical war on a weekly basis. 30 wars for at least 2 programs, if not, 28, you're looking at, another 4 teams at every jettison down to 28.
That's not to count that baseball is also going on at the same time. And baseball, college baseball specifically, has a hard enough time creating revenue in general.
Right. And
college baseball, I'm pretty sure, is the only sport that doesn't have full scholarships, but that's another point.
Yeah, we can get into that.
Which is also bullshit, but...
Yeah, 100%. But that's what I think you're getting into. And in the SEC, for the most part, outside of Kentucky and the occasional upstart Auburn every couple of years, or pick your second place finish in the SEC in basketball, the SEC outside of football, the baseball conference.
Yep.
And because that's what LSU is one of the cases that you can point to. LSU's got a 9,000 seat college baseball stadium. They're supposed to can't sell 100 seats. And that's because that's their second biggest moneymaker. So now you're competing. I really want college football or the first 6 weeks of the baseball season.
Yep. I agree. There's another point I was going to make, but I forgot it now. But I think, like I said, I think this is a huge mistake by the Big Ten, all these conferences that are canceling. And it makes sense now. I didn't think about this, but you made a good point. The conferences that are canceling, for the most part, at the FBS level are all regionalized. Big Ten and the MAC might as well be the same area. And then it's the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, same area. The American Conference, I think, is still willing to play. I think Conference USA, I think, is still trying to play. So all of that's kind of still regionalized with who's playing and who's not. So I think that's that was an interesting point by you, whether or not you were trying to make that point or not, or if I just finally realized it.
Yeah, Matt. Yeah, so I didn't put those 2 pairings together myself, so I'm glad you put it together for me. But that's another thing too, is the other conference, which I'm surprised the American is still. I think the only reason the American is still hanging on, I think they're in that kind of decision cut line to where they want to still play because they're still in that, if you want to call it a little brother syndrome or whatnot, to where it's a Power 6, not a Power 5. We're the 6th conference. No one cares. You're the 6th conference. Congratulations, you're on the cut line. The guy that goes home on Friday on a golf tournament doesn't win the tournament anyway.
Get rid of Houston and Cincinnati. They got nothing.
And Central Florida for the last 5 years.
Yeah, I forgot about UCF.
Kept the conference. But that's another thing too. When you get back to the finances of it all, is they were the kind of the smallest tier conference that would get headlines, and that they had a group of players allegedly were Central Florida players that had created a similar document financially with Pac-12, and they wanted a 20% revenue share of a conference that loses money already. So I guess they're wanting to pay for their scholarships potentially, but that was another thing to where I was surprised that they didn't kind of make that decision. But then you've got the good and the bad of using Twitter as your players association is you had the document come out allegedly from Central Florida players. And then you have other players in the AAC that are coming out, and the same thing happened in the Big Ten. That's why the Pac-12 didn't have any dissent in the ranks to kind of weaken their demands in their list, and they were the first ones to come out, so they got all the attention anyway. But the Big Ten list came allegedly out of Ohio State, groups of players or players outside of Ohio State, and they were like, yeah, we here in Columbus, we're doing okay. We like where we're at. We don't need to split 50-50 revenue share. This works fine for us. We're not sure what the rest of these guys are talking about. And the same thing happened with players outside of UCF in the AAC. They're like, what? Yeah, we missed that meeting, guys. What happened? Like, thanks for the invite. Like, that was it was the guy commented first on the Instagram post, where was my invitation? Like, none of them, it's players in small groups that are using the internet to amplify their message in an anonymous fashion that I don't think sometimes understand the ramifications and the pains of instituting some of the things that they're asking for.
So, staying with players, there was another point I wanted to make, and I remember it now. If it is safe enough to go back to school, it is safe enough to play sports. That is my personal opinion. You've already mentioned it. You are more likely to spread this disease just hanging out with somebody at a party than you are than in a controlled environment like football. And I think it's like I said, I think it's a huge mistake for so many reasons, from financially to also, if you don't have a season, these players, where are they going to go? They're likely not going to go to class, honestly. They're likely not going to go to class, and they're not going to have access to the training room to get tested, so they can still be out there spreading it around.
Well, and that's, I think, the point, which was a message from Neil Brown, West Virginia's coach, on Twitter yesterday through a media availability, where he said, this was before the Big 12 kind of re-upped their commitment to a fall season, where he said, if we don't, then what? And that's the question that the Pac-12 and the Big Ten are kicking down the road by saying, we're going to play in the spring. Well, you don't have any details. And that was Neil Brown's point, that he was outright saying, okay, so I don't know, can't be the answer. He goes, my players, specifically my team, and he said he outright disagrees with the spring season, which, I think, our opinions are clear that it's safe enough to do it now. In most cases, with the protocols that are in place that are followed. And he said, the players in my program, and I'm sure it's the case for every other coach in the FBS, are tired of the answer being, it's a virus, it's a novel virus, we don't know. That can't be the answer anymore. You've had 6 months. Figure it together. Figure it out. And that can't be the answer. And then I even saw, I'm not sure which program it was, but it was a retweet that I saw. It was a college football coach of one of the it was a position coach for one of the conferences that has canceled, and I believe it was one of the Power Five. And his outright tweet was, the day he got the news the season was canceled, and where did he go? To his son's high school football practice. He said, well, I guess I'll go watch my son's team play. If a high school can figure it out and do it safely, which a lot of the high schools in the Pittsburgh media market, where you and I both spend most of our time, and in other cases, I have a lot of athletic director connections at the high school level. It's getting figured out. It's all. I mean, it's personal responsibility, which depending on who you ask at any given time on any given issue in America these days, can be a sticky slope, or a slippery slope, I should say. But that's the situation. Like, we've got high schools that haven't canceled because we figured out, and the high schools in Georgia that viral situation is is a different argument. But at the college level, we have the money. Yes, we don't have the money to do revenue sharing. We have the money to figure out protocols. It's already been done. We have the money to execute those protocols. It's being done, and in a document that was listing out reasons to not play, admits that that's being done correctly and sufficiently effectively. Why can everybody else look at the same data? And I personally love, which, Sankey, I think, potentially of the Power Five, the best commissioner of the five, because he always seems to have a plan, always has a measured approach. And his comment when the decision came down yesterday was, I guess I'm going to have to call some people to figure out what they were looking at. That's like saying, no, Roger Goodell is the best commissioner of the NFL, or of all the major league sports.
Because it sure as hell ain't Bowlesby. It sure as hell ain't the Pac-12 commissioner. It ain't the Big Ten commissioner. Swafford's retiring. It's, what's his name, Sankey by default. Although I do think he does a good job. But
that is a fair point. That's what I think. Swafford, I don't think gets the credit that he should a lot of the time. But because the ACC has kind of just been not waiting in the weeds here, but they're kind of the ones that everybody, which they're the ones I think that should be. Not because the protocols, I think, are sufficient effective, as we've talked about. The ACC, outside, if you kind of exclude the outlier that is West Virginia from the rest of the geographic Big 12, the Big 12 is fairly regionalized. The ACC, from Boston College to Tallahassee, is a hell of a flight.
Miami.
And Miami, yeah. You're talking 3 hours on a plane just to go for a conference game, which is standard issue here in Morgantown, but.
Yeah.
That's something that I think should could potentially give pause to the ACC. But again, if you have that kind of bubbleized structure which has been instituted at the Power 5 level, that's even not really a concern because the Pac-12 document also mentions commercial flight. At the Power 5 level, I know some of the donors that pay for the flights at the university through some classmates of ours that have connections in those families. That's not a problem. Like, West Virginia has not flown on a commercial flight in years.
No.
Years.
Not even a basketball team.
No. Women's basketball team even. I mean, you get into like baseball and those guys, that's a different story sometimes. But and then when you get into the non-revenue sports, but they're still at this point, just from the kind of the exposure that the non-revenue sports get, they're even getting better accommodations now. I mean, particularly when it comes to Title IX type installations between men's and women's sports, they're at least getting, across the board equal treatment, but then that treatment's also being elevated.
Hang on, I had something. You cut me off you cut off at a bad time. So I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I don't understand why conference play matters. What is I said it when the Big Ten said it was going to a conference-based schedule. What is the difference between Maryland flying or driving to Morgantown, which is about 3 hours if you drive, less if you fly, obviously, right, than going and flying 5 hours or however long it takes to Chicago? What is the difference there? Why not just play the game in Morgantown? That's me, though.
Yeah, that's I think something that's going to come up here, which 2024-25 is the next year to kind of keep your eye on once we get through the pandemic. That's the next year when media rights for the most part across the major conferences are coming up, and that's kind of been pointed to.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I was just about to ask.
Because I think it's just you're gonna see a regionalization of the major conferences and particularly the smaller conferences, just because we've seen the budgets have exploded. Yes, the revenues have moderately kept pace, but in most cases haven't, and so it's led to that number of universities that clear into the black every year. That number's gone down in the last. I think the highest it's ever been was like 2012, 2013, right before the last round or right subsequently after the last media rights shuffle that landed us somehow not in the ACC. That's a different discussion for a different day on how we ended up. The Big 12 was kind of that the lifeline that West Virginia needed in that negotiation, just because of 60 years of the ACC's, high horsing, if you want to call it that, between some universities that sure remain unnamed because it'll probably sue me, but
you're not wrong.
But I think you see somewhere where you end up with, instead of chasing media markets, which happened the last time, and even added, I'm still scratching my head on a nightly basis trying to figure out why Piscataway, New Jersey, because of its ancillary nature to New York, required Rutgers admittance to the Big Ten to, frankly, on every single sport other than perhaps, I think, field hockey and women's soccer, bring down the level of play in the Big Ten.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But I'm glad you brought this up because there are several teams out there. Nebraska pretty much leading the forefront, kind of followed by Ohio State now that they can't play. Michigan kind of in the mix as well, that they want to play. But the Big Ten won't let them, obviously now. So what are the chances, and I mentioned this to my friends and they kind of laughed at me, but I was like, what are the chances that we go through another realignment? I didn't even think about media rights being up in 2025. I don't know if that's when it begins or when it ends. I'm not sure, but
I think it's the 24-25 season is when that academic year is when those contracts for the most part expire. I think some end in 24 and the rest end in 25. But you're going to see those negotiations start in the next 3 years because it's going to take a long time to get that that put together. But I definitely I see what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And but
if these teams want to play, who's to say they find out a way to play, and then the Big Ten and Pac-12 just be like, all right, well, kick rocks. You're no longer in the conference anymore.
See, that's the thing that I think keeps that from happening. Because I've seen several personalities in the college football reporting world say that is it really worth it? Which I don't think they're really looking ahead to the next 5 years, and those grudges can hang on a long time, and that's why you saw that between 2003 and 2012, a lot of that kind of the backroom dealing, depending on who you listen to. That's why West Virginia is not in the ACC today. Is because of the disagreements that came out of the 2003 realignment of the old Big East.
Mm-hmm.
And the question then becomes, how much do you want to stomach risk-wise of, say if you're Nebraska, do you want that risk of, how committed are you to the Big Ten after 9 years? If you are, then you probably hang back and go, okay, yeah, we've said some stupid shit out loud. And, Ben Sass, the senator from Nebraska, coming out leading the charge for the AD and the head coach, which, I think it was Wilbon on the old PTI. I haven't watched PTI, but I saw the segment, pop up on the news feed.
Yeah.
And he said, who gives a damn about Nebraska? No one in the Big Ten cares. He said the conferences exist for 106 years. It's the strip, or 116. Oldest conference in college athletics, Big Ten, outside I think maybe the Ivy League.
Yeah.
They don't need Nebraska. If Nebraska wants to ruffle feathers and look for a new home to play 1 year of, and if you follow the trajectory of Nebraska football, a mediocre football season, they're a 500 team at best this year with the talent they have in the Big Ten, maybe a 400 team. Is it really worth ruffling that much feathers if you don't think that the Big 12 is going to say, come to daddy?
I don't think the Big 12 will do that.
I don't either, and I think that's what keeps Nebraska's mouth shut over the next 3 to 4 months.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, though. Well, but I don't think it'll ever happen, but what if Ohio State gets so pissed off? I don't think it'll happen there because they're like one of the founding members of the Big Ten. But
right.
What if they do leave? And the Big 12 said from the beginning when they brought in West Virginia, we'll try to find you East Coast partners. Who's to say it's not Ohio State? Now, I know I'm getting a little outlandish here, but...
Right, well, and kind of, I'll follow you along that path so far, but here's the thing. When's the last time West Virginia played Ohio State in any sport other than
It was
basketball?
90-something. In football,
Right.
it was
And
98, I think.
Right. It's been a long time for, some of the kind of, if you follow, you're a big message board guy or just some of the connections that you hear off the record. There's a reason for that. There's, Gordon Gee coming from Ohio State that, softens the disdain a little bit between the two. But I think they're not looking for another, because what happened with the last media rights too, and I think what kept the Big 12, frankly, together in 2012 was you look at Ohio State. Is Ohio State really going to, after 116 years, separate themselves from Michigan and make it another November non-conference game? It's not going to happen. So then you're looking at where do Ohio State and Michigan go together, and then it all falls apart.
Yeah, I know. I was just spitballing there. I like to think about this stuff.
Hey, I follow along those, what do you call them, conspiracy theories or rabbit holes of what could happen. But, I think that certainly a time of upheaval that is, I think there's going to be a lot of things said in the next 7 to 10 days that are going to be regretted. And truly, I think
it's going to be longer than that. It's going to be a year.
I mean, even just from potentially this season, or maybe the media rights and stuff will come in certainly a longer time frame. But I think what you're really looking at is everybody's concerned kind of in the immediacy of the modern world of what have you done for me lately and what can you do for me now? I think what you're going to see with as far as decisions for the three remaining conferences is what the SEC, I think, has said all along. The ACC, Big 12 is, I think, just kind of copying and pasting the press releases still a little bit. I mean, Bowlesby, the last 36 hours potentially has pulled it out of his ass. But that remains to be seen whether that was the lucky strike of,
or
the clock strike twice.
Was that just the SEC and ACC being like, hey, here's a template, go figure it out?
Right, the old, right Big 12 top of the page.
Yeah.
Here's what we said.
Dude,
which, I
want to touch up on this. You took Miller's class, I assume, sport law, right?
Yes.
Did he say the same thing to y'all, that you can copy and paste work, just change the names? He told us that, and we were like, wait, you're telling us to copy and paste other person's work and just change our names? He goes, yeah, that's law. He's like, lawyers do that all the time.
There's a reason that we've made this country for 300 and some odd years in, and we're still working on precedent that your feelings on various politicians. We're pulling precedent from 1820 sometimes. They didn't know a damn thing in 1820 that we know now for the most part when it comes to how to operate things with the miracles of modern society.
I just thought that was funny. And just that whole thing with, Big 12 probably did steal it from the SEC and ACC.
But I think where they get that too is the pragmatism that you get from Sankey and Swofford, in that what they're really waiting on, because I think they are looking at maybe some of the same data and are just putting a positive spin on it for the next 4 weeks, is that they're waiting on, which is some of the stuff I've said about on-campus classes offline to friends and family, is that you're going to get kids on campus the next week and a half to 2 weeks across the country.
They're going to plan a month after that. If it's worse, they'll cancel it.
Right. You're going to get to, that's why I think that you've seen, which I don't understand the verbiage of, we've delayed the season, so we're going to start on September 26th. No, you just canceled your non-conference slate except for one potentially bye game, which the bye games really serve. I mean, I'm curious with the +1 schedule outside of the Florida State matchups of the traditional rivalries. Some of those other sports, why they're not kind of pulling that in. I know there was a couple of hours right after the ACC's announcement where there was thinking that you'd get a backyard brawl 2020 instead of waiting 2 to 3 more years, and that get those traditional rivalries, because there's no point, and people around Eastern Kentucky won't like me pulling their check out from under their their pocketbook. But there's no reason in 2020 for West Virginia to play a school like Eastern Kentucky, playing a regional rival. Give me anybody in the ACC that was in the old Big East. That's in the kind of the Mid-Atlantic region, the Virginia Techs. I mean, Virginia was a nice thought for a week or so in Atlanta, or even in Charlottesville for all I care. But there's the reason behind buy games for years, and you know this as well as I do, is that you get that money, the ticket revenue. You're making that whatever the number is for putting 60,000 butts in 60,000 seats.
Yep.
All of that reasoning is out the window.
Yep.
So why is that? Why are we still paying $500,000 to bus a team up 5.5 hours from Western Kentucky, or Eastern Kentucky?
I don't know. I mean, it's a nice warm-up game, I guess you could say. And I'm sure several other teams. I know the Big 12 already came out with a list of teams that have already scheduled non-conference games in this 10-game format. They're all small schools, so it really doesn't bother me that much. I'll tell you right now, though.
Yeah,
I know the committee's going to hold it against us if we somehow manage to have a good year. They'll be like, but they scheduled Eastern Kentucky in the non-conference.
They didn't play.
Because Florida State and Maryland got canceled. So, I got a text last night that said the NCAA is still supposed to vote on it. But it said the NCAA would allow Big Ten and Pac-12 schools or players in those conferences to transfer, be eligible immediately, and it wouldn't penalize wherever school they go to in the 25-man hard cap, if you follow me.
Yeah,
Okay.
No, I get what you're saying, and I mean,
so
that
I phrased it poorly, but basically, to all the listeners, every school in college football has a 25-man hard cap that they cannot go over every single offseason. They can add 25 players every single offseason, and that's it. Sometimes it works out differently. Sometimes you sign 22, but you blue-shirted 3 guys, so it comes out to 25. So that's basically how it works. But this would mean you could add as many transfers as you want, not count against that hard cap, as long as you're under the 85-man scholarship limit. For West Virginia, we could load up on dudes if we really wanted to, because we're at like 75, I think. Dana Holgerson left us with just about nothing. But we're at about 75. We could add about 10 transfers if we really wanted to and not have it count against us if they approve it.
Yeah, I don't think just because the NCAA is trying to hold what little bit of power they still have over the Autonomy 5, I don't think they want to piss off that many members of what little power they have left.
It's only 2. It's only 2. It's still majority, 3 out of 5.
Right, but then the other ones are going to look at that and say, "What if it's us next time?" And that's where I think you kind of lose them.
You know what? I don't really give a shit. Play your season.
I got no problem with that. You want to give me 10 dudes from Ohio State, and I've seen people joking. Hold on, what about this? Georgia quarterback Justin Fields. Maybe he goes back to Athens and takes over now. And that would just be comic justice at its finest out of Columbus, and I'm never going to complain about.
I don't think it's just Big Ten, Pac-12. I think it's any player who plays for a team in any conference, whatever, that canceled its season. I'll tell you right now, I love Jarrett Dagey. I think he's a good player, good quarterback. I'd love to have Trey Lance from North Dakota State.
Yeah, I'll take any quarterback that North Dakota State's had over the last, 5 to 7 years, and going back before that. Dudes that are winning it, and that's, you get, for the most part, top tier guys at the FCS aren't really that far off from top tier guys. And if at the very least at the FBS Group 5 level.
I agree.
If not, dudes, you get that's what guys like Deggy, he's just, above average guy at Bowling Green. Everybody goes, well, he's playing Bowling Green schedule. They're not exactly playing World Beers over there.
I saw his numbers and his tape. I was like, this dude can play.
it's the modern recruiting scheme where they go to certain schools, see certain guys, and then dudes fly under the radar and go to the community college or an FCS team up the street, and then 2 years later, holy shit, where did that guy come from?
I agree. What do you think the ramifications of all these decisions are going to be?
I mean, I think you've driven division between, I don't think you ever get the Autonomy 5 back within the fold of the true power structure of the NCAA.
Which, by the way, not many people know this, and I'm always trying to tell people because I see players for Power 5 institutions that think the NCAA is behind all of this. They are not. The NCAA has very, very little control over what happens in the FBS. The FBS really isn't a part of the NCAA. I mean, technically it is, but all the NCAA can do, really, is hand down sanctions and make rules for them. That's really about it.
And truly, the Autonomy 5 make most of their own rules. So they're not even making rules. I mean, the only rules that those 5 conferences follow are recruiting and financial aid.
Yep.
It's the only ones they're still following. So I think you've driven, I think that between all of this kind of, the scheduling division and all of the financial components of the coronavirus plus NIL, I think you could potentially be looking, and this is kind of, a doomsday scenario for most people's taste. I think you could be looking potentially in the next decade or so of the end of the NCAA as we know it.
Thank you! Thank you! I have said that to friends, and they laugh at me. I have said I think this could be the end of the NCAA if it goes this way. Thank you. Please expand on that. Prove me right.
Because here's what you're looking at. Everybody kind of, it was something that was floated as an idea when the Autonomy 5 broke away, several years ago, and it hasn't necessarily panned out that way to the general public. But those of us that sit in the industry every day and in meetings with people that are, in text chains with people that know things that don't get privy to the average fan, there's not much of a connection really holding them. And that's why you've gotten things like full cost of attendance, full, as small of a thing as it was at the FCS level, they're not really getting the full meal, allotment, unlimited snacks, etc. That got passed as kind of an Autonomy 5 measure. So you're looking at things like that, and truly, I think because Congress, politics and college football haven't ever been that linked. But you've got people like Cory Booker and others that he's kind of just the one that has taken kind of the lead, because I think it's his committee that the NCAA gets in front of a lot. And they're looking at this, and the NCAA is like, hey, you remember in the 60s when you get baseball, that exemption so that there can only be one baseball league, and it's kept baseball afloat for as long as it has? Yeah, can we have one of those? And the politicians are all like, you're joking, right? This is 2020. We're not handing those out anymore. Your lollipop's still in the wrapper. Get used to it. And so you're not going to get, the cat's out of the bag when it comes to that kind of thing. And then you're going to have kind of that top tier that when NIL and those things get instituted, and, thankful to have a coach like Neil Brown, not to toot our own horn as a fan base, but somebody that you've got coaches that are actively trying to obstruct that, and it's going to play out. They're going to suffer in recruiting, if for no other reason than that, versus a coach like Neil Brown who's actively leaning into it. You're not getting around this. They know it's coming.
Yeah. And
the NCAA is not going to be able to finance. Once you figure out a way that those Group 5 and they can maybe pull in the FCS basketball heavy conferences, if they can go do it on their own and start over, they'll do that happily, because then you can get things that make sense in 2020. Because we talked about legal precedent, the NCAA was flawed from the start. The student athlete terminology, etc., has been flawed since it came out in 1953. I think was the year that was instituted by the commissioner or
right.
Title creativity. And then, so that's what you've been looking at for 50 years. And they admitted it outright then what they were trying to get around. So, I think you see maybe less sports being offered once that breakaway happens, but you're still going to have, D3 has been doing fine for years. I think that's, you see it'll be more of a restructuring. The NCAA might exist by name and moniker, but it's not going to be controlling anything to do at the Division I level, and the smaller, maybe small Group 5 and some FCS non-football institutions are going to drop down to that D2 or D3 level just based on finances. And, they may cut some sports. They may add some sports that when they're not paying scholarships and that kind of, the full cost of attendance type setup. So that, I think that's where you get that, it sounds kind of, doomsday to say the end of the NCAA, but it's,
I think that's
the name,
very logical.
The name will exist. The name will exist, I think, in perpetuity. You're not going to have like the NACC or something and, come up with different monikers to fill each of those letters. But you're going to have, there's always going to be kind of a governance agreed upon structure. And that's kind of, I think, what you've seen with the, this kind of the football scheduling negotiations until this breakaway of the last 48 hours. And that they were trying, all five of them, to get together. They have the power to make those decisions. And I think there's a lot of what's really been driving this is a rule that kind of got overlooked several years ago, in that it places presidents of universities and chancellors back at the top of the figurative decision-making pyramid. For years, it was the athletic director to make the decisions, and the presidents can either disagree or agree. And it was their institution that was on the line, which in most cases, I think is a good, good thing to have, a person that makes all of the final calls. It's where you get something like democracy. You still got to do it at the top all the time that can make, those split-second decisions as far as, the health of the overall institution. But, you lose that, kind of foresight, and the president doesn't often sit in front, football kind of gets all the credit, and because it's the power, in the room. But how many times does the university president go in front of the football team and explain decisions?
That's why I think it's stupid the presidents are making these decisions. I get that they're in charge of the school, but they're not in charge of the athletics department. The athletic director is in charge of the athletic department. And if the athletic director wants to play, then I think that they should play. That's my opinion, though.
And if you want to take it that way, too, then you just look at it, the athletic director, in most cases, with some contracts set up, they're at-will employees in just about every state in America. If you don't like the decisions that your athletic director makes, and you want to be the guy that takes the buyout and finds another one, that's your power as the president to make those decisions, or a chancellor. You want to look for, every time you disagree with the decision of an athletic director, be finding a new AD every 18 months. Eventually, you're going to run out of people that want to be your AD, and you're going to back off your power structure a little bit.
Yep.
And let people, because that's kind of a personal philosophy of mine, particularly, in the workplace. You got people under you. Let them do their damn jobs. If you don't, hire the right people, train them the right way, and hire people according to your philosophy of how you want to run an institution, and then let the chips fall where they do. And if you don't like the decisions of certain people, then you find people that align with your agreement. And that's what I think you're seeing with Nebraska. They're kind of caught in the wrong conference. Top to bottom, Nebraska's people are all in line. The coach wants to play, the AD wants to play, the president and even U.S. senator, all in agreement, saying, put us together a schedule, let's roll. And that's, I think, what needs to be the case in all places, which makes it tougher to make decisions for 14 institutions at a time. But, that's where you make the decisions, and let them do what they want, and then, ramifications come from that if they need be.
Nebraska can kick rocks as far as I'm concerned. They started this whole shit.
You won't find many disagreements in the Big 12 country. That's conversations I've had in my trip. there. So no love lost for, and I think back then probably a short-sighted decision. That's something I think you look at with some of the things that we're kicking around now is where do those decisions get you in 5 years? It's like just Larry Scott or I don't recall the Big Ten's new commissioner. Does this blow up in their face and those guys never get another job again? I mean, they're smart guys, I'm sure, but where do these decisions land? And I mean, I don't think, and that's another thing with the pandemic in general in the country and everything else. You're not going to know half of the decisions you're making economically, sports-wise, or anything. You're not going to know the true effects for several years. But that's not the way that we decide on who's making good decisions or not anymore. It's, well, worked in 2 weeks. Guy's a genius. Didn't work in 2 weeks. Fire him. And then 6 months later, the guy you fired was a hell of an idea. It just took 6 months to work.
Yep. But we've talked about it a lot. I think these decisions are going to have huge ramifications. Not just who's playing and what teams are playing, what players are playing. I think this is going to have huge ramifications on the conferences themselves, the NCAA, the future of college football. All are leaning on what happens in this fall, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and I think something that didn't necessarily come up that we talked off air at various points is that you look at something like 1994 in baseball. It blew up in their face, and the only thing that saved them was the 98 home run race.
Yep.
They made anytime the thing that saves your sport makes a 30 for 30, there's going to be a 30 for 30 about this year, probably 6 times over here in a couple of years once everything shakes out.
If this could go as far as I think it can, we're looking at a Last Dance, which I haven't seen yet, but 10-part series about how the Big Ten and the Pac-12 not screwed it up, but screwed it up briefly, then possibly at the same time got rid of the NCAA and created a whole new realignment under the banner of some new, oversight governing body.
Yeah, definitely get on that Last Dance thing, though. That was big.
I didn't watch it.
I'm still using memes from that for various points in my text chains, but I mean, it's definitely, this is a massive time in the world for 100 different reasons, and then I mean, you've got the entire fate of collegiate athletics and potentially your and I's next 40 years of what business our paychecks are coming from.
But that's why I was so upset by this decision by the Big Ten. Not as a consumer. Everyone thought I was upset as a consumer. We'll get football back. I'm like, I don't deny that. I'm not upset about not possibly getting football this year. I'm upset because I'm trying to find a job in this field, and if there's no football, there's no revenue. If there's no revenue, there's no athletic department. If there's no athletic department, there's no sports. There's no sports except for the Power 5. You know how hard it is to get a job at the Power 5 level? Incredibly hard. That's been my whole point about this, is it's going to kill these small schools. The Group of 5, FCS.
That's where everyone gets their start.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. That's where everyone gets their start. And that's going to kill people like me who are looking for a job. And I think it's going to kill these universities. The smaller schools like the D2, D3 level, after talking to my brother, I think they'll be fine because they rely on, most of their money, they rely on donations. The Group of 5
this doesn't affect them, I think.
Yeah, I don't think this affects them really at all.
That's why so much has been kind of concentrated on the Autonomy 5 schools, because D3, if you just look at the finance structure, nothing's changed.
No, nothing's gonna change. They make all their money off donations.
As long as
Group of 5 and FCS, not so much. But no, I think we're looking at all 64 teams in Power 5 breaking away one day with a handful of Group of 5 schools joining them.
Yeah, I think you elevate, and then, I mean, it was something that got talked about in the last round. You get, five schools or five conferences of max out at say 16 schools. Pull a couple of regional schools. Say pull up a Cincinnati into a Big Ten or an ACC.
I thought of Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, USF, San Diego State, BYU, Navy, Air Force even. There's a lot of schools I think that can make that jump and potentially be competitive.
Or even if they're not, then you just get the perennial bottom feeders like Kansas football, and that's the way that the cookie crumbles, and you have a regular conference standing sheet where you can vote on every year. Eventually,
I forgot to mention in this new, in this futuristic version of college football, there is going to be a players' association as well. We're heading toward that, and I don't really have an issue with it because I just want what's the right word? I just want happiness. Like I don't want any problems. I'm tired of players complaining about not making money off their name, image, likeness, and I think that's the fairest way to compensate them for it.
Right, because that's the thing that it's you and I have both written our fair share of papers on paying athletes. How do you pay athletes? Where does the money come from? The only place the money can come from is NIL.
Yep.
It's the only outside money.
I don't like revenue sharing
money any other way now.
I don't like revenue sharing. Like I've seen people post, like Texas athletic department makes X amount of millions of dollars. You can pay the third string offensive tackle $50,000 a year. No. I don't want that. Third string offensive tackle's not seeing the field. I don't want to pay him $50,000. I have no issue though with paying Will Greer or whoever, Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence, X amount of millions of dollars to use their name, image, and likeness. I have no issue with that whatsoever. They deserve it.
That's American in a capitalist economy. You're worth money, you get money for it. That's just how it always, frankly, should have been. And I think if that's the way it always was, going back to the 50s, we don't have half the problems we do now.
Agreed.
And I think truly, which not a lot of people are thinking, necessarily about this in the same vein that perhaps my thought process is. But you get, once the NIL goes through several times, because that's always the moniker of the NCAA is, 98% of our athletes get pro in something other than sports. Are all looked at commercials 600,000 times over the last 20 years. And where something like NIL happens and helps is you perhaps get rid of some of that, systemic inequality, in a racial type vein, to where the amount of African Americans that come through a collegiate athletic department that are now getting money, you're getting the top 2% that are going to the NFL. Those other dudes that don't make it or are trying out for the XFL.
Exactly, and there's so many dudes who can still profit off their name, image, likeness. Who won't see the field on Sundays or play in the NBA or whatever.
100%, and that's something that is kind of an added bonus of NIL that's not being used as a reason to push it through. It's just being pushed through because it's the right thing to structure it and do what is always should have been the right thing to do. And then you're just getting, it's kind of, it happens all the time in economics and politics and everything else. There's ancillary benefits that come through that weren't the original reason. And then you get, you get more racial equality out of NIL that no one was really, not to say people aren't pushing for that. They're just not pushing for that through college athletics, but it helps.
So you got anything else to talk about? We've hit on just about everything.
Yeah, it's that thing. We could go for another 6, 8, 10 hours on some of these things and, talk ourselves into a circle and argue different scenarios. But I think we've hit on just about everything we could in a succinct fashion.
And we've been all over the board. I didn't come prepared. I like to do stuff organically anyway. But you had notes, and I appreciate that. And for the most part, I think you backed up everything I've been trying to say. This is bigger than just who's playing and who's not.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's it. If need be, I have all these things saved to send to the listenership, and that way they can kind of follow along with the logic that you and I are putting forth, and see where it takes them down the internet rabbit hole.
So what are you doing today? You're working?
No, today is just this week would have been the return to youth flag football in Morgantown this week, but that's been delayed another couple of weeks just to put together coronavirus package to kind of appease parents' minds and make sure that it's done right, because it is an indoor facility that Pro Performance runs through. So I would have been back with them this week, but had a job interview yesterday, so that was
with whom?
That was all good. Youth sportsplex is called Lake Point Sports. They're building it. It's like you go up 75 out of Atlanta, and just kind of up into North Georgia. It's like 25, 30 miles out of. Basically goes Atlanta, Marietta, Kennesaw, and then the next city up is Cartersville, and it's like right off in Cartersville. This play, I mean, they're putting so much money. They played open in 2014, so they're 6 years in, and they're a third of the way done through their money spend, and right now they've got 8 MLB size, like they have 2 4-field pods baseball, 170,000 square foot multi-purpose center that can do 24 basketball courts at a time.
Wow.
3 wave tech pools that are like, water skiing and, all kinds of stuff. They have 3 multi-purpose fields, just turf they can play football on or soccer or whatever, plus outdoor sand volleyball. And I was talking to the COO was in my interview, and he's like, we've pretty much done everything we can do. We have 1,300 acres, and I'm looking at all that stuff going, it looks probably like that could take up 1,300 acres. I don't know how to look at a map and determine acreage of a.
I don't even know how big, in feet an acre is. I should know. My dad has a farm, which is about 250 acres. I should know that, but I don't.
It's another thing that I'm, 30 seconds away from knowing on the internet, but it doesn't matter enough for me to figure it out. The guy's like, we just got approval this week for a $30 million bridge over to the other part of the property to build out the rest of it. He goes, we don't really know exactly what we're going to build yet, but he goes, by the time we're all done, we're going to be like $1 billion. And I was like, and you didn't do the Austin Powers when you said it? Wow. Like, you said $1 billion like it was no big deal. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I could. And I was like, then I might be looking to, up my salary demands from, it's like,
what do you, the job's we're in the same field. What do you put for salary demands?
I usually just put, because when I was in Ohio, like I started, like when I first started there, I got 30, and then it was 30, but then like a Christmas bonus, depending on how the whole company did that year financially. They just kind of split the profits among. It wasn't like you didn't own part of the company, but like they just, took some of the money off the top and gave you a Christmas check.
All right, so that's roughly in the ballpark, because everything I've read online says $35,000 starting salary for sport management, and then add another $5,000 with the masters. I have the masters, so I'm saying I'm still asking for 35, but I feel like I should be looking at $40,000 if I can land a job.
Yeah, well, that's what, when I, like, a month before I got pushed out at Cincinnati, or else I would probably still, like, stuck it out at least through the pandemic when they fired half the staff. But they kicked everybody up to every entry-level person up to 35.
Yeah. Like,
a month before I left. So, like, they're at 35 now. They just weren't when I started. But this place in Georgia is 32.8. But with that financial incentive at the end of the year type thing where it's like, all right, if we hit our metrics or whatever that they, their occupancy percentage and stuff that they look at, that, there's, a carrot at the end of the annual stick which I was like looking down there. The thing is like, and I'll go on a lot of those websites like cost of living comparison. A place called bestplaces.net. There's a hyphen in between best places, but it just you go on there and be like, I'm looking at this place, Cartersville, Georgia. Couldn't have put it on a map 6 weeks ago. How the hell is it expensive to live there? Like, I mean, like one of my.
I can assure you, it's not. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. I can assure you, Cartersville, Georgia, or whatever, is not expensive.
You'd be surprised that like the apartment market there is tight. Like it's Morgantown prices, bro. Like it's
really?
Like I haven't found a single one bedroom apartment down. Like I mean, I don't have a job yet, but like probably if you don't look now, you're behind when they say, hey, can you start in 2 weeks? Oh shit, let me find an apartment and move 9 hours in 2 weeks. Sure thing. But yeah, it's like most of the places down there, which it helps one of my closest friends, which is like an extended cousin. We just call each other cousins because it took us 10 years to figure out how we were related. And if I didn't have an aunt, just did like does excessive genie. It's just like that aunt that everyone has that just does like Ancestry.com 40 hours a week to figure out nothing.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh yeah, it's like, wait, who's she? Whose niece is she? Oh yeah, you guys are. And tells me whatever the title was, and I was like, got it. So we're cousins. Cool. We've had it right since high school. But she grew up in like just around Marietta, so she's like, yeah, literally, if you get the job, we'll just like sit on the phone for a couple hours, and I'll tell you everything you need to know about living in North Georgia.
Well,
works for me.
It's a nice area. Hopefully, it works out for you. I'm hoping it works out for me. I have not heard back with just about anything.
No, I got it's a girl that I worked with in Ohio that pretty much the only reason we still talk is because she will, up until I have to tell my future wife differently, the most attractive woman I will ever meet in my life, that I will ever have her phone number and actually responds when I text her. But yeah, so she and I talk all the time, and she's like, yeah, I've had 3 jobs since, because she worked at her last job was the Rockies, so when March hit, she's they got them in like
good fucking grief.
It was May before they furloughed them.
Yeah.
And it was like, which I have another guy from undergrad that is out there with the Avalanche. They never furloughed anybody. He goes, we were literally like actively petitioning management to furlough us so that we could get the extra unemployment. And they never did. But she's like, I've had 3 jobs this year since May. They were like, yeah, you're our pick. We'd love to hire you. Hold on, let me go check with HR. Oh, sorry, HR said no. She goes, what the fuck do you mean HR said no? You didn't ask them first?
I mean, this is just a very difficult time right now for sports. If there's no sports, we don't have jobs. That's why I've been very frustrated this whole year.
Well, I even after even before that, I was like, I guess I'll go referee flag football for $12 an hour for
Shit, man, that's more than I make.
Well, it's like $12 for 40 minutes, so it's actually like $16 an hour, 18.
All right.
But it's like, it was also like, it comes out to like $100 a week or something for like 8 weeks. So I'm like, well, it would have been something for those 8 weeks before unemployment kicked in. But I was even looking, I was like, well, I like finance, I guess. I mean, I could probably, like, every time like my dad would go to like a retirement meeting with his, retirement guy, I was like, oh yeah, I could maybe do that. And so I just keep like applying to all these places. I'm like, oh, that's right. They look and go, good to have a finance degree. Fuck them.
Oh, he doesn't have a finance degree. Fuck him. No, it's a hard market. Hopefully it works out for the both of us.
Yeah, find something eventually.
I was close. If I had found out Gordon Gee here, the president at WVU, had voted against a season, I would have told WVU to kick rocks. Like, I was going to tweet them or email them, whatever, and be like, do not expect any money from me until Gordon Gee's gone. And I used to love the guy, but that if he had voted against a season, that's basically saying, we don't give a shit about your profession and your ability to find a job.
Yeah, well, shit, what was it? I was say something. Damn it. Anyway, no idea where I was going with it.
Well, I got to get going. I hate to just cut off, but I do my work starts at 5, and it's 4:46 here, so I do have to get going. I think we had a great conversation, though. Really, I think we both made some excellent points. You brought in the facts, and I mostly just did the emotion, but I thought we did a good job of presenting how this is a huge issue with college football. It's not a small issue, and it's more than just COVID.
Yeah, and I think coming from two guys in the profession, I think that's a good way to look at the world. That a lot of people, we both know people and can text people. I mean, hell, I can call Kelly Zinn on a daily basis.
You can talk to Kelly Zinn?
I've sat with her twice. She's like, if I see her, which I don't see her on Morgantown, since.
You know who I can get on the phone right now?
I mean, if I had her phone, I don't have her phone number. That's the thing, but like, anytime I would see her, like back when I was working retail, she would come over to Office Depot just at random, and I was like, why the hell are you? I was like, why you're like WVD? Why are you send the secretary to go buy her pens? Like, what are you doing here? And she'd be like, oh, Dylan, hey. I was like her long lost best friend, and so it's like anytime we see each other, she still acts like she recognizes me, and oh, because I was at a scholarship dinner senior year of undergrad 2 months before her wedding, and just the table was me, my mom, Kelly Zinn, maybe April Mesterly was there, and then a professor or something. I think Bravo was at that table. No, Bravo wasn't.
Dr. Bravo.
I think we had Cindy Lee at that table too. It was
just Dr. Lee. She's such a nice lady. Can't understand a word she says, but she's such a nice lady.
She's great to email.
Oh yeah, her and Lotsky were in my grad school interview. There was supposed to be someone else. They never showed up, so it was just Lee and Lotsky. And Lee asked the majority of the questions, and the entire time I was just like, "Huh? What'd you say?"
Sure.
I was like, "Yeah, sure."
I could do that.
And then Lotsky would ask a question. I'd be like, "Oh, thank God, I can actually understand the American."
God, I haven't talked to him in forever. I was gonna call him one time because one of my days was growing out of Bridgeport. I was like, "Hey, hey, Lotsky, I'm gonna be in your neighborhood. If this goes south, can I come to your house?" I love Gare Bear, but he is so all talk about. I need to come out, but he tell us all the time. I need to come out and have drinks with you guys. Lotsky, we go out for drinks about every Thursday. Where are you? And he's always busy or something. My wife said I couldn't.
Yeah, that's the big one. My wife said I couldn't. Oh, I got to go watch my boys' basketball game, which is fine, whatever. But yeah, it's mostly, my wife says I can't.
Yeah.
All right, I got to get going. Really good conversation. I'm sure we'll stay in touch. We're friends on Facebook.
Yep.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
To bullshit with for an hour, let me know.
Oh, absolutely. Now I have someone else to ask to come on the show. This is always fun. I like having new guests. It's usually just a revolving door of my friends from Alabama who I love, and they listen to the show and, are willing to provide some good insight on the show, I guess. But I get bored. It's nice to have someone new for a change.
Yeah. No, this was fun, and I can be the facts guy and just bring it in because that's what I always was at the tailgate, the guy that knows all the random shit that no one needs to know.
Hey, you're willing to read a Pac-12 brochure about COVID. I'm not, so.
Yeah. No, that's how I spend my days, listening to podcasts and reading the latest in coronavirusness.
All right. If that's what you want to do, go for it, man. All right, I got to get going. I'll see you around. Thanks
All
for
right,
coming
man.
on.
I'll see you.